"I never thought I'd see him again," Emily Carter whispered, her voice trembling as the rain pelted the cracked pavement around her small apartment building, the neon glow from the street signs casting flickering patterns across the wet bricks, and every step she took toward the cafe where she had arranged to meet the lawyer of her long-lost twin felt like walking into a storm she couldn't escape. 10 years had passed since her sister had married Adrian Black, the Vampire King, using Emily's name, and the thought of facing him now, in the shadow of a secret child she had never known, made her heart hammer against her ribs like a drum, but she had no choice, not when the envelope in her hand held the truth that could unravel everything she thought she knew about her past and her future. Stepping inside the dim cafe, she scanned the room, eyes catching the gleam of a familiar silver bracelet on the wrist of a man at the far corner, his posture rigid, aura cold yet compelling. Adrian Black, standing taller than any man she had ever seen, his black coat hanging perfectly, his silver eyes catching hers for the briefest instant before he turned back to the documents in front of him, and in that moment, Emily felt a chill that was more than the November air, sensing that the room itself had shifted, that magic, old and binding, lingered in the spaces between. The sound of her own breath loud in her ears as she approached the table where the envelope had been placed, sliding it across to Adrian without a word, his eyes narrowing slightly, scanning the paper, lips pressing into a thin line as recognition and shock flashed across his face in a heartbeat, the subtle twitch in his fingers betraying the centuries of control he had maintained over his immortal life, and then, from the side door, a small boy stepped in, hair dark and eyes amber that mirrored Adrian's own, clutching a worn leather satchel, looking at Emily with a mixture of hope and confusion, and Emily froze. Realizing instantly that this was the child of her past she had never met, a living reminder of the choices made without her consent, the life built in her absence, the silent weight of years pressing down on her chest, as Adrian's gaze shifted between mother and son, flicking from Emily's face to the boy's trembling form, the room thick with tension, unspoken words hanging like mist, magic subtle yet undeniable shimmering faintly around the edges of the envelope as if responding to her presence, and in that instant Emily understood that her world had irrevocably changed, that the path she thought she would walk alone was now intertwined with Adrian's authority, the boy's future, and a destiny that demanded courage she hadn't known she possessed. The storm outside fading to a soft drizzle, but inside the cafe, the air was electric, crackling with the energy of reunion, revelation, and the promise that what came next would challenge every assumption, every fear, and every heartbeat Emily had carried for the last decade. Emily stepped closer, her eyes never leaving the small figure of the boy who clutched the worn satchel tightly, and she felt an unfamiliar mix of fear and hope pressing against her chest as Adrian Black's presence loomed beside her, his silver eyes fixed on her with an intensity that seemed to measure every heartbeat, every thought, every unspoken word. And the hum of the city outside the cafe was replaced by a heavy silence that stretched between them, a tension that made the air feel dense and alive. The boy shifted slightly, looking up at Adrian, his amber eyes wide with a question he did not dare to speak aloud, and Emily instinctively crouched to meet his gaze, her hands brushing over the satchel as if to anchor them both in this fragile moment, the light from the street lamps casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor, highlighting the contrast between the ordinary and the extraordinary, the past and the present, while Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw moving subtly as though he were weighing 1,000 decisions, each one carrying the weight of centuries, and Emily sensed that despite his cold exterior, something inside him recognized her in ways that transcended memory, something raw and binding. She took a slow breath, steadying her trembling hands, and then spoke, her voice clear but soft, "I want to understand, I want to know the truth," and the words seemed to echo in the quiet room, stirring a reaction in Adrian as his eyes flickered briefly with an emotion that was almost imperceptible, a hint of curiosity, recognition, and of vulnerability. Long hidden, the boy taking a small step forward, his fingers tightening around the satchel, as if sensing that Emily's words carried power, a bridge between them, and Adrian shifted his stance slightly, his cloak brushing against the polished floor, the faint sound reminding Emily of the centuries of authority, the walls of the cafe suddenly feeling smaller, as if time itself had contracted to focus entirely on this convergence of past mistakes, hidden truths, and the fragile potential of reconciliation. And then Adrian extended a hand, not in command, but as a gesture that invited trust, a silent offering for Emily to take, and she hesitated only for a heartbeat before letting her fingers brush against his, feeling a pulse of something ancient and unspoken, a connection that seemed to hum in the air around them, binding them not just to the boy, but to a history neither could deny. And as the rain outside slowed to a gentle drizzle, the neon reflections in the puddles danced faintly, mirroring the sparks of understanding, curiosity, and tentative hope that now filled the space, and Emily realized that this moment was a beginning, a step into a world she had feared and yet belonged to, the boy's small hand reaching for hers, Adrian's gaze softening just enough to allow the light of possibility to shine through, and in that silence, charged with anticipation and unspoken words, she understood that their story, their shared fate, had only just begun. The rain had eased to a light mist, leaving the streets glistening like black glass, and Emily Carter followed Adrian Black and the small boy through narrow alleyways toward the castle gates, the air heavy with anticipation, the faint scent of wet stone and iron lingering, each step echoing against the ancient walls as they approached the towering structure that seemed to pulse with quiet power, its spires disappearing into low-hanging clouds. Emily's fingers brushed against the boy's hand. Instinctively, feeling the warmth and the nervous energy radiating from him, while Adrian's gaze swept over the surroundings with a precision born of centuries, alert to every shadow, every subtle shift, the faint glow of his silver eyes reflecting in the puddles on the cobblestones, commanding attention without a word, and as they entered the grand hall, the massive doors closing behind them with a resonance that vibrated through the floor, Emily's breath caught. Taking in the vast expanse of polished marble, chandeliers shimmering with thousands of candles, their light bouncing off the ornate walls, and the air itself seeming to hum with history, legacy, and unspoken rules, she noticed how the boy hesitated at the threshold, looking up at Adrian, whose expression softened ever so slightly, acknowledging the child's presence and granting him a quiet reassurance. And Emily felt a flicker of courage, understanding that this connection, this family she had never known, might offer her both hope and challenge. They walked down a corridor lined with statues of long-dead rulers, the cold stone contrasting with the warmth of the human presence beside her, and Emily felt the weight of the centuries pressing softly against her, a reminder that every decision here carried gravity, every glance mattered, every gesture echoed through history, as Adrian paused, finally speaking, his voice calm but resonant, explaining the significance of the boy, the legacy of the soulmark, and the ancient laws that bound them. Emily listening intently, her heart both heavy and lifted, realizing that while the past could not be undone, her presence, her choices, and her courage might shape the future, and as they reached a quiet chamber with windows opening to the misty gardens beyond, the boy's small hands released the satchel, stepping closer to Emily, his eyes filled with trust, and she knelt to meet him at eye level, whispering reassurances, feeling a strange, comforting energy between them that seemed to settle the tension, and Adrian, standing tall beside them, allowed a subtle smile, his posture still commanding but his eyes softer, watching them both, the room shimmering with the delicate balance of power, trust, and newfound bonds, the storm outside now a distant memory, leaving only the quiet hum of possibility, the promise of revelations yet to come, and the unspoken understanding that their lives were forever intertwined, destiny drawing them together. And Emily took a steadying breath, ready to step fully into this world she had only glimpsed, knowing that the challenges ahead would demand courage, patience, and faith in the connections that had just begun to form. Emily followed Adrian Black and the boy through the winding corridors of the castle, the flickering candlelight casting elongated shadows on the ancient stone walls, and every step seemed to echo through centuries, carrying with it the weight of history, legacy, and secrets long kept. The boy, whose name was Lucas, clutched Emily's hand, his small fingers trembling yet trusting, his amber eyes wide as they took in the grand tapestries, intricate carvings, and the soft glimmer of polished floors that reflected the warm, golden glow above, and Emily felt a sense of awe mixed with apprehension, knowing that each room held stories she could not yet comprehend. Each turn might reveal truths both comforting and unsettling. Adrian walked beside them, his posture upright and commanding, his silver eyes scanning the hallways with an intensity that made the air feel alive, yet there was a softness when he glanced at Emily and Lucas, a subtle acknowledgement of connection that transcended words, and Emily sensed the depth of responsibility he bore, the weight of centuries balancing against the fragile hope that had just begun to bloom between them. They reached a chamber filled with towering shelves of ancient books, scrolls, and artifacts, the scent of aged parchment mingling with the faint coolness of the stone, and Adrian gestured for them to sit, the boy climbing onto a chair beside Emily, his small hands resting on the polished surface, and she realized that this was a place where knowledge, power, and memory converged, a space where the past could guide the future, where lessons learned and promises made could shape the choices they were about to confront. Emily took a slow breath, steadying herself, and as she looked at Adrian, she noticed the subtle flicker of emotions in his eyes, a mixture of curiosity, patience, and something that hinted at vulnerability, and she understood that the bond between them, once obscured by time and deception, was beginning to reveal its strength, its depth, and its potential to heal, to protect, and to guide. Lucas reached for a small, intricately carved box on the table, opening it to reveal a delicate pendant, and Emily recognized the symbol as a mark of legacy, a connection to Adrian's line. And the realization struck her that her presence here was not an accident, that fate had woven threads long ago that led to this moment, intertwining their lives, hopes, and responsibilities in ways that demanded courage, compassion, and insight. Adrian spoke softly, explaining the significance of the symbol, the ancient laws it represented, and the promises embedded within it, and Emily listened intently, feeling a sense of empowerment as she grasped the weight of what had been entrusted to her, while Lucas's eyes reflected wonder and recognition, understanding that he was part of a lineage far greater than himself, yet bound by the choices of those who came before. And as the candlelight flickered, casting shadows that danced across their faces, Emily felt the stirrings of determination, resolve, and quiet hope, knowing that the journey ahead would test their hearts, strengthen their bonds, and reveal truths that could reshape the lives of all three. And in the stillness of the chamber, a sense of anticipation hummed in the air, promising challenges, revelations, and the subtle yet undeniable power of connection, trust, and destiny. The grand hall of the castle stretched before Emily Carter, bathed in a soft golden glow from the countless candles that lined the vaulted ceilings, and the scent of aged wood and polished stone filled the air, grounding her in the weight of centuries as Adrian Black guided her and Lucas along the marble floors, each step echoing like a drumbeat of history. Emily's eyes traced the intricate tapestries depicting generations of vampire kings, their gazes frozen in time yet somehow commanding attention, and she felt a shiver of awe as she realized that this was not merely a home but a testament to enduring legacies, responsibilities, and unspoken rules that had governed this world far longer than she could imagine. While Lucas squeezed her hand, drawing courage from her steady presence, his amber eyes reflecting both curiosity and quiet apprehension, and Emily smiled softly at him, feeling a surge of protectiveness and determination as she understood the delicate balance of trust and authority that hung between them. Adrian's steps were measured, his cloak brushing lightly against the floor, his silver eyes surveying the hall with a sharp intelligence that seemed to take in every detail, every shadow, and every nuance of the room. Yet when his gaze fell upon Emily and Lucas, a subtle softness flickered across his expression, a quiet acknowledgement of connection that was rare and precious. And Emily sensed that despite the centuries of control and composure he maintained, there existed a depth of feeling and recognition that she could not ignore, a bond that was both powerful and fragile, like a thread weaving them together across time and circumstance. As they approached a side chamber filled with artifacts, ancient scrolls, and glowing symbols etched into the walls, Emily felt a magnetic pull toward the objects, sensing that they held stories, wisdom, and perhaps the keys to understanding the choices of the past, the intentions of the present, and the possibilities of the future. While Lucas moved closer to the display, his small hands resting lightly on the carved pedestal, eyes wide with wonder, and Emily followed his gaze, seeing the same spark of curiosity and recognition reflected in her own eyes, a silent reminder that even in a world filled with centuries-old power and solemn rules, there remains space for discovery, connection, and the quiet unfolding of destiny. Adrian spoke in a calm, resonant voice, explaining the significance of the artifacts, the ancient laws that bound them, and the responsibilities that came with knowledge and lineage, and Emily listened intently, absorbing each word, feeling her heart expand with understanding and her mind ignite with questions and possibilities. While the boy's presence served as a constant reminder of the intertwined fates, the shared legacies, and the new path that had opened before them, a path that demanded courage, wisdom, and trust. Outside, the mist swirled softly around the towers of the castle, the faint light from the distant city reflecting in the damp stones, and Emily felt a sense of quiet anticipation, knowing that every choice, every gesture, and every connection in this moment could shape the future in ways that were both profound and unpredictable. And as Adrian's hand rested lightly on the boy's shoulder, a gesture of guidance and protection, Emily understood that their journey was only beginning, the castle a living testament to history and power, the boy a bridge to the past and the future, and the bond forming between them a force that would carry them through challenges, revelations, and the unfolding mysteries that awaited. The air thick with possibility, trust, and the subtle hum of destiny weaving them ever closer together. Emily Carter stood silently in the grand library, the soft glow of hundreds of candles reflecting off the polished wood and gilded bookcases, their flickering light casting long, dancing shadows across the intricate carvings that lined the walls, and she could feel the weight of centuries pressing gently against her, each step she took echoing softly as Adrian Black guided her and Lucas through the expansive room, his tall frame moving with deliberate grace, the silver of his eyes catching the candlelight, sharp and assessing, yet softened just enough when they met hers to convey trust and expectation. Lucas shifted closer to Emily, clutching her hand tightly, his small fingers warm and reassuring as he gazed at the towering shelves, his amber eyes reflecting curiosity and a quiet wonder that reminded Emily of the fragile yet profound connections forming between them. And she realized that this was more than a reunion or a revelation, it was the beginning of understanding, a bridge between past mistakes, hidden truths, and future possibilities, each artifact and scroll around them a silent witness to the legacies they were now entangled with. Adrian's voice cut through the stillness, calm and resonant, explaining the significance of the artifacts, the laws and rituals that shaped his lineage, the meaning of the soulmark, and the responsibilities that accompanied it. And Emily listened intently, her pulse quickening not from fear but from the gravity of what she was learning, each word building a framework for her role in this ancient, powerful world, while Lucas's eyes remained fixed on the symbols etched into the walls, absorbing every detail as though sensing their importance. The air seemed to hum with energy, a subtle magic that pulsed faintly from the artifacts and walls, binding the three of them in an invisible thread of destiny. And Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of anticipation and cautious hope, knowing that every choice she made in this moment, every word spoken, and every gesture would echo far beyond this chamber, influencing both the boy's understanding of family and Adrian's acknowledgement of the ties that had long been forgotten. As she moved closer to a pedestal displaying a small, intricately carved relic, she reached out gently, feeling the faint hum of energy beneath her fingertips. And Adrian's eyes followed her every motion, unwavering yet patient, guiding her silently, teaching her to recognize the significance without speaking. And she realized that this quiet instruction was as important as any words, that trust and attentiveness could bridge gaps centuries in the making. Lucas leaned against her side, whispering a question, and she smiled, answering softly, her voice steady yet filled with care, acknowledging both his curiosity and his place in this unfolding story. And Adrian's gaze softened further, a rare gesture of approval and connection. The three of them standing together amid the grandeur of history, power, and legacy, the library echoing with the silent promise of lessons learned, challenges yet to come, and a future slowly but inexorably shaped by understanding, courage, and the bonds forming between them as they took their first steps into the deeper truths of the world they now shared. The castle corridors seemed to stretch endlessly before Emily Carter as she followed Adrian Black and Lucas, the faint echo of their footsteps mixing with the distant murmur of wind against the ancient stone, the glow of candlelight creating dancing patterns on the walls that shifted like memories of the past. And Emily felt a strange combination of awe and apprehension as she realized that every step carried them deeper into a world both magnificent and intimidating. Lucas's small hand gripped hers with quiet determination, his amber eyes wide with curiosity and tentative confidence, and Emily could sense his trust in her, a fragile thread binding them together as they approached a massive door adorned with ornate carvings and glimmering symbols that seemed to pulse softly under the candlelight, as if reacting to their presence. And Adrian's tall, commanding figure paused beside her, his silver eyes scanning the room ahead with an intensity that made the air feel charged, yet softened just enough when he looked at Emily to convey understanding and reassurance. And she felt a warmth spread through her chest, a subtle acknowledgement that they were not alone in facing the unfolding challenges. Stepping through the doorway, they entered a chamber filled with ancient artifacts and towering shelves of manuscripts, the air thick with the scent of aged parchment and polished wood, each object seeming to hum with its own quiet history, and Emily could feel the weight of centuries pressing gently against her, reminding her that the choices and actions she took here would echo beyond the walls of this castle, shaping the lives and legacies of all who lived within it. Adrian guided them to a central pedestal where a collection of delicate relics rested, their surfaces etched with symbols and inscriptions that hinted at forgotten knowledge and hidden responsibilities, and as Emily reached out to touch one, a subtle vibration ran through her fingertips, a connection she could not explain, the relic responding to the presence of both her and the boy, as if acknowledging their shared destiny, and she felt a surge of clarity and courage, understanding that her role in this world was no longer incidental but essential. Lucas leaned forward, his eyes reflecting wonder and a growing sense of purpose, and Emily knelt beside him, whispering words of reassurance and encouragement, feeling the quiet strength that came from their shared resolve, while Adrian observed with a measured patience, his posture still commanding, his aura radiating authority, yet softened by the recognition of trust forming between them. And in that moment, Emily understood that the bonds they were building would serve as a foundation for navigating the complexities of this ancient and powerful realm. As they explored the chamber together, the candlelight flickered across the walls, highlighting the intricate carvings and the gentle movement of shadows, the room alive with the energy of history, legacy, and the promise of new beginnings. And Emily felt a quiet determination settling within her, knowing that the journey ahead would require wisdom, courage, and compassion, and that each step they took together was a step toward understanding, connection, and the unfolding of a future that could finally reconcile the past with the present. The boy's hand still in hers, Adrian's gaze steady and unwavering, and the chamber holding the quiet resonance of destiny aligning in their favor, every breath, every glance, and every motion carrying the weight of trust, hope, and the beginnings of a bond that could endure the test of time. Emily Carter stood at the threshold of the chamber that overlooked the sprawling gardens below, the moonlight spilling through tall arched windows, silvering the dew on the hedges and the delicate sculptures that dotted the landscape, and she felt the weight of centuries pressing around her, a quiet reminder that every choice, every step, and every word mattered in this place steeped in history and power. Lucas clung to her side, eyes wide and luminous in the soft glow, his small hand intertwined with hers, and Emily felt a protective warmth surge through her, realizing that the boy's trust and curiosity were guiding her as much as her own courage guided him, while Adrian Black remained just behind them, his tall frame commanding yet attentive, his silver eyes reflecting the moonlight, scanning the grounds with a precision that hinted at centuries of vigilance. And yet, when they flickered to Emily and Lucas, they softened ever so slightly, a rare acknowledgement of connection and trust. She took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs, and let her gaze wander across the garden, the intricate layout of fountains, pathways, and ancient trees speaking of tradition and legacy, and she felt a sense of awe mixed with apprehension, knowing that the responsibilities and choices that lay before them were intertwined with the history of the castle, the line of vampire kings, and the fate of the boy who now looked to her with hope and expectation. Adrian's voice broke the silence, calm but resonant, explaining the significance of the garden, the rituals and customs it represented, and the delicate balance of legacy and duty that governed every decision within these walls. And Emily listened intently, absorbing the gravity of his words, understanding that while she was a newcomer to this world, her presence carried weight, and her choices could influence not only the boy's future but also the stability and harmony of the castle itself. Lucas shifted closer, whispering a question about the lights and the reflections on the fountains, and Emily bent to answer him, her words gentle and measured, giving him both reassurance and guidance, while Adrian observed, his expression unreadable yet attentive, his presence a steady anchor amid the vastness of the chamber and the weight of centuries of history surrounding them. The moonlight glinted off the silver etchings on the walls, casting long shadows that danced with every flicker of candlelight, and Emily felt the energy of the space, the subtle magic and influence that seemed to hum faintly in the air, a reminder that they were not merely visitors in this place, but participants in a living legacy, each breath, each glance, each movement carrying meaning and consequence. As the three of them moved along the veranda overlooking the gardens, the air cool and fragrant with night-blooming flowers, Emily felt a quiet anticipation, a sense that the unfolding journey was both a challenge and an opportunity, a chance to connect, to understand, and to influence the path ahead, and as she glanced at Adrian, his silver eyes reflecting both authority and an unspoken invitation to trust, and at Lucas, whose small hand rested lightly in hers, Emily understood that the bonds they were forming in this quiet moonlit moment would carry them through revelations, challenges, and the unfolding mysteries of the world they now shared, the night itself seeming to hold its breath in anticipation of the choices to come. The night had grown still, the moonlight spilling across the castle terraces and gardens in silver ribbons, and Emily Carter stood between Adrian Black and Lucas, feeling the weight and promise of the journey they had shared, the air around them thick with quiet anticipation and the unspoken understanding that the steps they had taken together had changed the course of their lives forever. Adrian's tall form remained steady beside them, his silver eyes reflecting both authority and a rare softness as he regarded Emily, a silent acknowledgement of courage, resilience, and the bond that had formed in the spaces of shared trust and discovery, while Lucas looked up at them both, his amber eyes filled with awe, wonder, and a budding sense of belonging, the boy sensing for the first time that he was part of a family that stretched across generations, a connection reinforced not by blood alone but by care, attention, and the choices made in moments of courage and clarity. The castle itself seemed to breathe around them, the soft flicker of candlelight casting moving patterns on the walls, the polished marble reflecting shadows that danced like ancient memories, and Emily felt a quiet strength settle in her chest, knowing that the world she had stepped into, once so foreign and intimidating, was now a space where she could act, influence, and nurture. Guided by understanding and the subtle yet powerful legacy of Adrian's line, she took a slow, steadying breath and allowed her gaze to wander over the gardens below, the hedges glistening with dew, fountains sending gentle sprays into the night air, and the soft hum of distant wildlife punctuating the silence, and in that moment, the three of them, Emily, Adrian, and Lucas, stood as a trio bound by destiny, courage, and newfound trust, the years of deception, absence, and uncertainty behind them now forming the foundation for a future that held possibility, connection, and hope. Adrian's voice, calm and resonant, broke the silence as he spoke of responsibilities, legacy, and the strength that comes from choice and integrity, and Emily listened, absorbing not only the words but the weight and meaning behind them, understanding that the journey ahead would be shaped not by fear but by the steady courage they carried together, each decision a thread in the intricate tapestry of their shared fate. Lucas shifted closer, offering his small hand to Emily, and she grasped it gently, feeling warmth, trust, and determination radiating from him, a reminder that even in the midst of centuries-old power and authority, human connection, care, and attentiveness could shape destiny, inspire courage, and open paths that once seemed impossible. The moonlight reflected on Adrian's sharp features, his expression softened by the quiet acknowledgement of this moment. The silent affirmation that bonds built on trust, understanding, and bravery could endure, and as Emily looked at the two of them, she realized that they had arrived at a point where past mistakes, hidden truths, and long-held secrets no longer dictated their choices, where courage, empathy, and connection would guide them, and in that still, luminous night, the three of them stood poised on the edge of new beginnings. The air alive with promise, quiet magic, and the subtle, inexorable pull of destiny aligning to bring their lives, hearts, and futures together in ways both profound and enduring.